Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from YellowCat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. How quickly did you quit your last job and why? Part 6. A single full day of work. At a law firm it took place. My application was initially turned down. However, I received a phone call the following week asking me to come in on the following day. They called me on a Sunday. When I arrived, I had a meeting with a person who would have been my boss. We'll refer to him as John. A member of the board of directors at the company is John's uncle, and John was given the position as a result of nepotism. I had a meeting with the individual who would be taking over for me, and she began guiding me through the process. We will refer to her as Anna. After a few hours had passed, Anna addressed me with a statement that was similar to the following. Listen, you appear to be a really nice guy, and I cannot let you work here in good conscience. The time has come for you to leave immediately and never look back. Over the course of almost 5 years, this location has held me captive. Therefore, in order to become an attorney in my country, you're required to work for a specific law firm for a period of 2 years. During that time, they simply delegate all of the most difficult tasks to you and pay you something that is extremely low. Moreover, in many of the companies, they treat you as if you were garbage. They knew that Anna would leave once she was finally admitted as an attorney by the court, so they kept her there for 5 years and refused to sign off on her articles. This was made possible by the fact that they knew she would leave. Therefore, she worked for an additional 3 years, but they refused to acknowledge that she possessed the necessary experience, skill, and expertise that she had already accumulated in the field 2 years prior to her employment. In addition, she was unable to leave because doing so would have resulted in the complete and utter waste of her time, and she would have been forced to begin again somewhere else where the same incident could very well occur to her. Additionally, she was in a very poor financial situation and had to rely on the meager salary in order to make ends meet. To refer to the salary as peanuts is an act of generosity. She persisted in her efforts, and in the end, they agreed to the terms of the agreement when she filed a lawsuit against them. As a result of her resignation, which occurred just a few days after her admission was processed, they are currently searching for new candidates, fresh meat. She also went on to tell me that the employee turnover rate is through the roof, which came as no surprise to anyone. On top of that, the staff was required to work 12-hour shifts each and every day, and they were also expected to come in on some weekends, but they were not compensated for overtime work. Totally insane behavior. It turned out that they hired me rather than any of the other 5 candidates they interviewed because they all quit after the first day of the interview process. It was a pleasure for me to follow suit. On a regular basis, I look at their reviews on Glassdoor, and the words abuse and crazy hours can be found scattered throughout those reviews. Sadly, but not surprisingly, Anna is no longer engaged in the practice of law. I was a writer for a fledgling video game publication years ago. This occurred during the period when the industry was changing from fan sites that were concerned with their readers to sites that were run by gamers to what it is today. It was unpaid, but when the business took off, I would have a senior role, and that day was drawing near. During this time, I pointed out that there aren't even 200 hours in 8 days, and based on average work hours over 8 days, I predicted the actual game length to be 100%. As a result, one of my pieces forced other outlets to change their 200 hours in 8 days story for Kingdom of Amular to a generic 200 hours. I was told by one of the owners one day that I would have to make up the game's quality. One example that was brought up was BioShock Infinite, which I said was a horrible game. I would have to lie about things like that, but the owner claimed to know. In my opinion, the audience lets me do what I do. It was against my principles on many levels to betray them. After giving it some thought, I made the decision to resign. I spoke with the other owner, who was very understanding of my background and accepted my explanation for leaving. I don't think there was any bad blood. The other owner was furious, but we're still friends on Facebook, despite the fact that the company died when I left. I was reporting 6 to 8 stories a day in my prime, occasionally more than 10. Back then, there was a lot of news to cover, unlike now though. Back then, it was simpler because Google didn't need 300 words in order to index an article. A story received exactly 100 words if it required that much space. It obtained more than 600 if that was necessary. For example, the Kingdom of Amular piece mentioned earlier. Because of my volume, other works from comic books, anime, and other media weren't overshadowed and were given their own game category. They would extract 1 or 2 pieces daily. After I left, there was no one who could produce articles at my pace and quality. I understand now to believe sources when they claim to be high quality. They have publishers and developers under their thumbs. Since damage control is how they make their money, they'll handle it for them. On my second day there, I practically leaped through the front door. I'm not sure if it qualifies as a resignation because I wasn't hired properly yet. It was an IT position for a retail center. After interviewing me on the first day, the head of security said he liked everything and that I should report to work immediately. I got to know the workplace and it was really disorganized. I was ordered to resolve a security software issue that had existed since the previous IT specialist departed by the head of security. The previous IT specialist made a mistake that required a week's worth of work and involved several parties, including those who maintained the security software. The head of security became irate and demanded that I get it working quickly when I tried to explain it to him. The head of security chose not to notify anyone that they had a new IT guy, so on the second day, the security guard would not let me inside. The owner of the shopping mall will be there next month and I'll put in a good word for you, so he will definitely hire you, he said when I asked when I needed to sign the remaining paperwork to start working officially. This was the tipping point, but there were a lot of other problems that made me not want to stay there. I told him I couldn't resolve this the way he wanted to and I was going to quit. He said, "Oh, come on, freak on, how come you all gave up on me in such a manner?" He persisted in trying to talk me out of leaving, even after I tried to explain that it wasn't the only reason. I pretended to go back to my job, hurried through the front door to my car, and drove off after realizing he would not accept no. What was the most insane event that happened to you as a homeowner in an HOA? Part 6. Our homeowners association lodged a complaint regarding our Christmas decor and any other holiday decorations we displayed. That's all right. Then, because we don't have street lights and live in a townhouse on the north side of town, it gets really dark and my wife turns out the lights on our front door. They made a big deal out of it. Next, they shouted at us, yelled that our trash cans were left outside for too long. It was down the way across the street when I went to check, not even us. We usually enter through the garage, so when I walked to the front of the house today on my way home, I noticed how badly the landscaping had been done. The mulch had mostly blown away, trees are broken or twisted, most of the non-indigenous plants that have been scattered about are dead. It appears repulsive. The weed sheets, also known as blockers, that are beneath the mulch are torn up and dispersed across the sidewalks. Living here makes me feel ashamed. The fact that they can't even maintain the place tidy and attractive while being and moaning about decorations really gets on my nerves. I was gonna upload a photo of the terrifying experience, but it's forbidden. HOA is free to F off and leave this place. I apologize for the tirade, but they are so blatantly biased. The biggest one, in my opinion, is that they aren't maintaining the neighborhood's beautiful appearance like they did when we moved in, even though I'm pretty sure they pay someone to come by every day and check for violations. It was also one of the first buildings when we moved in, and it looked amazing. Despite the fact that I am not to blame for the situation, I'm constantly receiving letters, threats, and/or fines. To name just this year, even though he leaves his trash can outside, my neighbor likes to position it close to my driveway. Additionally, he likes to leave it close to the entrance of my driveway despite the fact that it has his house number spray painted on it in very large white numbers. Therefore, I own the fine. In addition to that, they send a picture that shows his house number printed on the cans. In the beginning of the summer, I received a letter that instructed me to clean the stucco that was located on the front of my house. I gave it a thorough cleaning at the beginning of August, and it looked as good as new. In the letter they sent to me, they threatened to fine me if I did not clean it by the end of the month during the month of October. When you look outside, the next door neighbor appears to be a complete and utter failure. I wrote a letter to explain all of the regulations that govern the presence of trees in the front yard, including the fact that they cannot be so tall that they block windows, the frequency with which they need to be pruned, and the amount of the fine that I will be subject to if I do not immediately prune the tree. The response that I sent was, "We do not have even a single tree on our property." Another letter was sent to me, and it included a photograph of the house that is located across the street from mine. I write them once more, this time explaining to them that even though all of the house numbers in the pictures are odd, I actually live on the even side of the house. In my response, I circled the house number that was shown in the photo. It was the third time that they had written me back with a fine amount. Despite the fact that I called them and yelled at them, they had nothing to say other than, "Oops." I was threatened with a fine for taking the Transcans out of my garage for one day in the middle of the week. We're only permitted to take them outside after 5 o'clock on Sunday so that we can reorganize our belongings because that's something people do sometimes. Apparently, this was too much for them to handle. In the one and only instance in which I ever requested their assistance, it was because my neighbor was not taking care of the flowers and weeds that were grown in front of their house, and it was growing onto my driveway. Another thing that they did was plant 20 stargazer lilies in a small area that borders my driveway and is close to our windows. My wife is extremely allergic to these plants, but they don't seem to care. In addition, the association does not. I will never again reside in a neighborhood that's governed by a homeowners association. I was given a violation for having an ugly cable while I was subleasing a duplex. Since Cokes is not good at making sharp turns, the Cokes line went under an awning and only moved a few inches away from the house. In true HOA fashion, they immediately threatened legal action with fines and evictions instead of asking me to do anything. The odd thing is that the cable had been cutting that specific corner since the house's last paint job because it was painted the same color as the house, which is when it was constructed 15 years ago. Fortunately, my landlord was understanding and took care of it. I'm pretty sure that some old snob wanted us to be stoned because he didn't like that we were a young couple living a sinful lifestyle. In the year 2020, we would not be able to hold meetings in person and would instead opt to use Zoom. For some reason, a vice president was in charge of all the meetings, and she was extremely rude to everyone. She would be impolite to homeowners, cut them off, and she would always agree with the management company. To put it simply, she was a waste of time. She was arrogant, dismissive, rude, and hateful both inside and outside of meetings all the time. In addition, she never failed to defend the poor lawn and landscaping company that the board of directors had hired to take care of our common areas. During one particular meeting, she interrupted an owner and dismissed them as not being as intelligent as she was, saying, "Well, I'm a rocket scientist." Therefore, I inquired with my friend who works at NASA about whether or not he was familiar with her from her time spent working there. It was he. It turns out that she attended the same high school as I did. I asked a different friend if he had known her because she had graduated a lot earlier than I had. Let us just say that he had not only known her, but had also known her in the sense that the Bible describes it. I asked him to look through his high school yearbook and send me a picture of her when she was a senior. Bad hairstyle from the middle of the 1970s and everything. She had verbally reprimanded me in a previous Zoom meeting for doing the dishes and moving around in the frame throughout the meeting. I adopted her senior picture as my avatar for a subsequent meeting that I attended. My avatar's not moving around, so it won't be a distraction to anyone. Her shock was obvious to everyone. Due to the fact that she was so shocked, she decided to sell her house and move to the countryside with a guy. To this day, I believe that her boyfriend has kicked her out and she's now back in her hometown. She's no longer in a relationship. The mismanagement company, the landscape company, and the landscape company were all fired by the board, and new ones were hired. The board had to elect a new board, which is also much better. Some people have been offended by the new team, but they're fair in their enforcement of the rules. They do not favor any particular individuals, and they have managed to bring our collection rates up to 95%, which has allowed us to be profitable. If you want to watch the part 5, click the link here. We're very, very glad to see you all in the comments again. Many thanks for support.